Now, El Salvador will be a safe third country, so anybody from, let's say, China that China won't take back, we can now send them to El Salvador. They said we'll take everybody, including.
欢迎收看最新美国关于遣返非法移民的新闻。
To an update now. The first U.S. military flight to deport migrants from the United States to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba departed from Fort Bliss today. CNN was the first to report the flight, carrying around 10 migrants with criminal records, including suspected members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Using a flight tracker app, KTSM tracked a U.S. Air Force C-17 aircraft that departed from Biggs Army Airfield around 1 p.m. today. It landed in Cuba over 4 hours later. Now, while visiting Fort Bliss yesterday, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth spoke about the Trump administration's plan to use Guantanamo Bay to hold migrants. Take a listen.
It's the perfect place to provide for migrants who are traveling out of our country through gray tails or other assets, but also hardened criminals. Where are you going to put Tren de Aragua before you send them all the way back? How about a maximum security prison at Guantanamo Bay?
It's the first step in what's expected to be a surge in the number of migrants held at the Navy base in Cuba. President Trump has said it can hold up to 30,000 migrants. Now, El Paso's Congresswoman Veronica Escobar commenting on the flight saying, quote, "I have just learned that a flight left from Biggs Army Airfield at Fort Bliss to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. As a reminder, the situation on the border does not merit the use of military resources. El Paso currently has capacity, apprehensions are down, and the use of Guantanamo Bay is predicted to cost hundreds of millions of dollars. These measures are nothing more than unnecessary and cruel political theater and a gross misuse of federal funds and military personnel." End quote.
Today, representatives from several migrant advocacy groups gathered outside the Desert Palm Shopping Center. That's near 36th Street and Thomas. They announced a boycott of businesses in that plaza.
And Troy Hayden is standing by with more on that. Hi, Troy.
Yeah, right there in Central Phoenix. Big change in policy. The Barrios Defense Committees. They say the owners of Home Depot and Walmart located at that Phoenix shopping center have authorized Phoenix police to come onto their property and arrest day laborers who are seeking employment from Home Depot customers. So advocates are responding with a boycott against the businesses there in that shopping center.
What they don't realize is that we buy from them. We are the ones that consume here. Home Depot is mainly, at least in this area, most of the people that buy here are Mexicanos or Guatemaltecos or contractors that hire them too.
This is the most vulnerable people in our community, and just like they rose up in 2016 to defend our community, we need all our community to defend each other. So we're calling for the boycott of this property, Walmart and Home Depot, and we're calling for us to stay unified and to protect each other.
And you see day laborers looking to be hired at Home Depots all over the valley. So the question is, will this happen there? Critics of the policy questioning how police are distinguishing between day laborers and other people who are just there, frequenting the store. So we reached out to the owners of the Desert Palm Shopping Center for a statement on the new policy, and we have not yet heard back from them. Mark, Caribe, back to you.
All right, Troy, thank you so much.
In the meantime, some other domestic issues to cover here at home. Nassau County will have 10 deputies working with federal agents to arrest undocumented immigrants accused of crimes. It was a move that caused immediate controversy. Jennifer McLogan covers Long Island, and she reports the county will accept federal funding to help ICE.
Nassau is not a sanctuary county, announced Executive Bruce Blakeman, flanked by dozens of law enforcement and GOP politicians. 10 Nassau detectives will immediately partner with ICE to come pick up undocumented New Yorkers arrested for crimes.
We are going to cross-designate and embed Nassau County police detectives with ICE for the purposes of picking up targeted illegal migrants who've committed crimes, and then we will be detaining them in the jail.
Local jail for 72 hours. Then U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will move the undocumented migrants accused of crimes to a federal facility or deport them. Immigration advocates we spoke with met the Blakeman announcement with trepidation, saying there's been fear and confusion since executive orders tied to immigration enforcement were signed by the president.
For me personally, more fearful, more concerned.
Brian Perez was born on Long Island, first in his family to graduate college.
My mom's a permanent resident, also terrified because God knows when they could come knocking on our door.
Nassau legislator Carrier Solage.
I have reached out and I have spoken directly to the principals and superintendents in my district. They are reporting that less students are attending school.
Julia Miller is an attorney with the Central American Refugee Center and was just engaged to a DACA recipient with temporary immigration status.
It's a scary time. It's, you know, as somebody who is an advocate who is trying to dispel that fear, it's hard not to feel it yourself when you are, you know, this should be the happiest time of your life.
While the Civil Liberties Union condemns Nassau's decision, the county executive says deputizing local officers as ICE agents is what voters want and will keep Nassau safe. On Long Island, Jennifer McLogan, CBS News, New York.
Let's check in with Lawrence Jones. He is live down on our southern border in El Paso. He visited Fort Bliss with our defense secretary and our friend Pete Hegseth for that first border visit since his confirmation. And then they also flew on a Black Hawk with Tom Homan as well. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, good morning, family. I just want to piggyback on y'all last conversation because this is why the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was here. You know, a lot of people don't know, but we have a military assets that focus on the narcotics that impact our country. It was created back in the 60s by JFK, and that's U.S. Southern Command right here in Fort Bliss. That's why the Secretary of Defense was here. He said that we haven't been using these assets the way we should. It's clear that there's a threat coming across the border as it relates to the drugs, and they're going to get active real fast. Here's a little bit of our conversation yesterday.
We have no better negotiator at the helm than our Commander-in-Chief, Donald Trump, knowing how to use economic pressure to get results on the ground. Let's see how Mexico responds with troops and whether or not they actually do stem the flow. But all I know is what we can affect, and we are not going to back down. Intimidation is not going to work. And the message I have for the troops here is across the board is we have their backs. We have your back. We're going to give you the tools necessary to get 100% operational control of that border.
A lot of people talk about the corruption in Mexico. Can we trust those guys? Will they actually be helpful to the mission?
Well, they're helpful. The first administration, President Trump, you know, made Mexico put military on the border, and it was very effective. He made Mexico agree to remain Mexico program, right? This is national security. When we secure the border, less people die from fentanyl, less women and children sex trafficked, less people on terrorist watch lists cross that border. This is a national security issue. President Trump's going to shut it down.
So some people may be wondering what the setup is. Why have Tom Homan, the borders are on one side, and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, on the other side? The Secretary made it very clear, Secretary Hegseth, he's going to focus on the outside of the border, going after the enemies there, making sure the border is secure from that aspect. Tom Homan is going to focus on Border Patrol, the interior aspect of it, as well as with ICE, hunting the bad guys, the criminal aliens with inside of the country. It's a two-pronged approach, and then you got Marco Rubio that is going to be communicating with all those foreign countries to make sure they take their people back and they prevent them from coming to the country in the first place unless they want to do it the legal way.
That's right. And yesterday, Marco Rubio negotiated a deal with El Salvador. Now, El Salvador will be a safe third country, so anybody from, let's say, China that China won't take back, we can now send them to El Salvador. They said we'll take everybody, including members of MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as well. So that is going to be very helpful because just think about it. If you are being trafficked across the southern border by a cartel, I have no idea how they're going to get in. But if they are, how do you make that pitch? All right, if you get into the country, you could live in San Diego or you could live in Omaha or whatever. But now the news is if you get in the country, you might get sent essentially to a mega prison in El Salvador or Gitmo.
Yep. And Lawrence was mentioning Tom Homan, the interior of our country. Over the weekend, they nabbed so many people. ICE did. The senior Trump administration official that talked to Fox News Digital said agents nabbed over 700 illegal immigrants over the weekend, including more than 500 with convictions or charges. And I was looking through the list. One person, a Honduran national, arrested in San Antonio, Texas, close to where you are, Lawrence, and she had a conviction of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Another one in Seattle, a Mexican citizen with a conviction for robbery and delivering meth. One in Phoenix, Arizona, a Mexican national with a murder conviction. One in Detroit, a Colombian man convicted of domestic violence and possession of cocaine.
So I just want to give you a tidbit, Ainsley, because those are the people that are already in the country. So we got to prevent them from even being able to make that journey across. Banks, he used to be the Texas border czar. He's now the chief of Border Patrol, 4-star. He had a process when he was the border czar in Texas with the National Guard, essentially instructing them to push them back. So what you've seen during the Biden administration, a lot of the migrants would just surrender. They've already did the app, and they knew they were going to get a notice to appear, and then they would be released in the country. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, is adopting that same strategy with the troops on the border now. So people aren't just going to be able to surrender. If they see people trying to break in the country, they're going to say, go back. They will push them back. And if they attack those border agents, like with a mob, like they do with some of these caravans, they're going to have the pepper bullets as well, like Texas used then. So you're not going to see this surge of people coming across the border anymore. There are people there to meet them when they try to cross the border.
And of course, that underscores the very vital importance of the Remain in Mexico policy, because if they never actually cross the border, then it doesn't become a problem. It doesn't become our problem.
That's exactly right. And that is why the troops are on fire right now. They got fire in their belly right now. They get to do their jobs. By the way, I told y'all earlier I spoke with some of those troops. We're actually going to air some of that conversation of me speaking just with rank and file. I mean, in the last administration, we were prohibited from talking with them. We didn't get to hear their stories. Finally, the shackles are off of them, and they can tell the American people how they feel.
That's great. You said morale is up, and Brian Kilmeade keeps saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that our border crossings are down 93%. Isn't that the statistic he always says?
Substantial.
It's
a big number.
Lawrence?
Yep, that's it, right. And they're trying to get the numbers daily so we can have a tracker, but it's around the 90s, Ainsley. I think you're correct.
That's amazing.
So Lawrence, when you were in that ride-along, in that Black Hawk, going from where you are, El Paso, to the west through New Mexico, how big are the existing gaps in the wall?
There are some big gaps, and I'm so glad you asked that question. I got to talk with the former border czar of Texas as well, who's now over all the Border Patrol, chief of Border Patrol. And I asked him about the money, because this is a question that y'all guys asked me yesterday in the show. He said, essentially, they haven't used money from 2020, 21, and 24. So they're going to already start the construction of the border wall. Now, it's not going to be enough to complete all of the wall. They're going to need that reconciliation bill to pass. But there's enough money to restart the Trump wall that was incomplete.
Have they been able to get all those pieces back that the previous president tried selling off?
No, they haven't. They were able to stop some of it because a federal judge made them stop selling off the wall before in that past administration. But a lot of that stuff was sold. And you got to remember, we had already paid for that. And then they were so upset with Texas. Texas offered to buy the rest of that wall that they were selling to reconstruct it ourselves. We were going to pay billions of dollars to do it. And the Biden administration refused to sell it to Texas. So there was a lot of just petty behavior from the last administration that made us less safe as a result.
Yep, and then your governor had to step in and say, we're not selling this wall just to the lowest bidder. We need this wall to stay here. And then Donald Trump, of course, took over, and hopefully what's left of it will be able to be used again.
All of it intentional.
Indeed. And Lawrence just mentioned a moment ago, tomorrow he will be featured from Texas, where we once again are going to hear from some of the troops. Lawrence, great job.
Great to see you.
感谢收看，美国没有边境墙真的不行。
Sí, este pie pasa, pasarlo para acá, aquí. Agárralo, güey.
Hey. Pásame ese maletín, porfa. Coge la zapatilla. Please. No, el maletín, el maletín. Habla la maletín. Es mío. Here. Please.